So the way I thought I would do a clever fraud is when you contribute to the colleges, you're a member of some society. They have very clever names for them. But for example, over 10,000, you're platinum. Over 5,000, you're gold. 250 to 500, you're kind of cardboard or something like that. But they'll pick up a slightly nicer word. So I thought, why don't I invent a little fraud whereby what the accountant does is the accountant skims the bit off the top so that the person is in the same society or club that they were, but we've just taken the top bit, the cream, off. And that is because you get published and you get in the various college publications, you're a member of the gold or the platinum society, and you would know if you suddenly were one society lower. They also have dinners and functions, and so you want to be invited to the right one. If you invite more than 10,000, you don't want to be invited to the cardboard dinner because it would look like our lunch, which was not bad. So what did I do? I seeded it with a fraud, and what I found was that only 16% or 1/6 of the amounts had actually had some froth that I could have skimmed the amount off the top. And what I skimmed off was about 135,000. When I did, we actually did find reasonably large changes in, of course, the sum. The mean suddenly had a significant difference. And when it came to the measures of dispersion, I could actually see a difference over there because what's happened was the very large donations had very large amounts skimmed off the top, and so my distribution became a bit more symmetric, and I didn't have these outliers on the high side. So to cut a long story short, I skimmed off the top, and I could see changes in the dispersion and in the location, and in some cases in the shape. When I looked at the histogram, amazingly, the histogram is not that different for the fraudulent data and the current period data, and one of the reasons is that most of the fraud is concentrated in this last bar over here, 450 and higher. And what's happened is the count is still the same. I still have the same number of contributions. I've just skimmed some off the top, and so this last bar, this is where the action is, but we're not picking it up. Amazingly as well, when I look at Benford's law, and I now look at the current and I look at the prior, the differences aren't significant at all. In fact, I can't tell that much from the Benford's law graph. The reason for that is a number of these skimming operations left the first digit wherever it was. So for example, if a donation was $170, I took 70 off and it went down to 100, but it still had a first digit 1. For all the others, the skimming sort of had offsetting results, and so it sort of canceled itself out, and Benford's law didn't appear too powerful over there. So we're almost done. The results, about 1/6 of the numbers had amounts that I could skim from. I could find it through location and dispersion, and neither the histogram nor Benford's law helped me very much. So in the end, I still had a few questions left unanswered. Number one, there are many different types of errors and frauds, so it is hard to generalize in this context. Number two, each change due to an error or due to a fraud should have some effect on the descriptive statistics, but I'm not sure how big of an effect. The questions remained, are the effects large enough to be noticeable, and can I separate this from random fluctuations in the data? Have I chosen the best subset? And so actually I wrote down some better conclusions over here. Number one, if the errors of fraud are not that significant, you are not going to pick it up through the descriptive statistics. Number two, not all descriptive statistics are created equal. So some were better predictors than others, but I'm not sure now whether I can generalize at this stage. And number three, I think that this is useful in a comparison situation where I have prior data and I have past data. And even if we don't pick up fraud or errors, at least just the very act of going through and analyzing the statistics and having a look at them and seeing what they tell me, the act of actually analyzing the data gives me a better understanding as to what I have in the data set. So that was the 12-minute version. I'm happy for questions, and there's even time for closing comments. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Did you consider fraud in the prior period as well?
And I have had some comments on the paper, and they did say I'm not on such strong ground because I am assuming that the prior period data is good. So, fair comment. Nicholas, you want?
I guess the other question would be, if you found this result and then you went back to the development office of the university and pointed it out, they would most likely say, well, the economy's been bad, and so some of our contributors pared back the amount, and you write that down and go away and say, explanation reported.
Actually, so what I do have, the descriptive statistics are going to change under 3 conditions. Number 1, just a change in conditions. Number 2, errors, or number 3, fraud. And most often, I'm probably just going to have a change in conditions. What actually happened here was they had a big drive simply to get people to contribute anything. And the thought was, if somebody at least gives $10 this year, this is now a start. Next year we can go 25, and the year after we can go 50. So they did have a drive to get any type of donation, including $10 donations. And so, yes, you might get that explanation and then leave. From a fraud perspective, though, we should have this skepticism. You should be skeptical of almost any answer.